Okay.
We're here today with our second interview. We'll let him introduce himself and tell us a little bit about himself.
My name is Roy Finn, and I'm 84 years old. I'll be 85 in June. I'm retired now for about 20 years. I was a registered pharmacist that didn't like the confinement to the drugstore, but so I decided to work for a pharmaceutical company, and I worked there for 40 years. Had a good time too. I joined the service. I was drafted actually in the service in 1942, 1 week before the Coconut Grove fire. To give you an idea when that was. And before I joined the service, I was in school and working. I was in a medical detachment attached to an infantry company. I did the work that was known as a medic. How did my parents feel about me joining the service? Like most parents, I don't think that they were particularly happy. But if somebody didn't go to the service in those days, it was tended to be a little bit of a disgrace. So they might not have wanted me to go, but I was anxious to go. And I think they were proud of the fact that I did go. I had older brothers that were 20 and 30 years older than I did, and they didn't go.
How old were you at the time?
I was 20. I was 20. I turned 20 in June. I did my basic training in Texas, a place called Camp Maxey, which I don't think exists anymore. Then we moved to a Camp Swift outside of Austin, Texas. We went on maneuvers in Louisiana prior to going up to Camp Kilmer in New York, which was what they called a POE, a point of embarkation. And it was interesting that when we got there, we couldn't really sleep because the place was loaded with bed bugs. So we had to go and sleep outside. Got onto I forget what they call those ships now that were built by Kaiser, and I forget what they call them. I may think of it in a little while. They were small ships, and in the beginning we were quite seasick, and there were several submarine alerts. We didn't see any, but when we heard the destroyers hooting, you knew that there were submarines in the area. And we all were, in a way, anxious to see them, but in a way we weren't anxious to see them. Then we went overseas from Camp Kilmer, which, as I said, was a point of embarkation. We had the night off before we shipped out, and we went into New York City, and it was sad to see a lot of husbands and wives saying goodbye. Some of them probably would never see their husbands again, but that was kind of sad. You asked me if there's culture shock on my part of meeting people from all over the country. I wouldn't call it a shock. I was a little surprised to see. I never had seen a Mexican before, and they were a little dark. They were from California. But after I got to know them, maybe a day or two, I didn't see any big difference in many of the others. But I did have kind of a shocking experience when I went into the service. I went in with a fellow that was black that lived on my street at home, and he was my friend and I was his friend. And when we got into the service at Fort Devens, we were in a huge sort of assembly hall, maybe. That must have seemed to me in my memory thousands of guys in there. And they called out certain names, and his name was one of them. I didn't pay much attention to it until I saw him a little later. And I asked him what they called him out for. He said, because I'm black, I can't serve with you. So if you ask me if that was kind of a shock.
Do you know what they ended up having him do?
No, I don't. I don't. I never saw him again. I don't think he was killed, but I don't think he came back to Massachusetts again. Do I have any interesting experience about my basic training? Not really. I think everything was interesting, but the best part of it was when we'd get either a furlough to go home or an overnight pass or a weekend pass to go into Dallas and look for girls. There were a lot of girls around, and we went to a place in Dallas called Fair Park, which was an interesting place. And at night we would go to sleep at churches, and temples would open, and they'd have beds in the basement, and we could go to sleep there because there were no hotel rooms for us. If there were, we couldn't afford it. And they served us breakfast, and it was quite nice. I thought the people were excellent. My military specialty was that, as I said, I was a medic. Myself, I was in charge of 2 other medics. There were 3 medics attached to each infantry company. You said, did I see any action?
Yeah, did you see any combat itself?
Yes, I did see. We went over, I think it was in early September of 1944. Fortunately, we weren't chosen to get there any sooner for D-Day. And we landed in Normandy, actually, and we had to climb out. The piers weren't ready, so we had to climb down like these rope nettings into boats that took us ashore. And then we bivouacked for, I would say, a week. And it was interesting. I cast my first vote for Franklin Roosevelt while I was there in France.
How, if you don't mind me interrupting,
Yeah.
how did that work? Did they send the ballots over to you?
I really don't remember. I know that I went and voted, and I don't remember whether we had a ballot or they asked us, but I think we probably had a ballot. But I don't remember that exactly. Then they took us by truck to the German border, and that's where we started to experience some action, quite a bit actually. One of the largest tank battles of the war was fought there, and we saw a lot of strange things. A lot of people got hurt, some people got killed, and interestingly enough, when any of at least the people that I had to do with got hurt, instead of frightening me, it made me extremely angry. And I was glad that at that time that we didn't have any prisoners. I'm not sure if I would have punched one of them or what I would have done, but we had prisoners, but I didn't see them. And we fought our way across Germany, and the war ended. We were 40 miles from Berlin, and we could hear the Russian cannons and bombings going on, and the sky at night was lit up, even though we were 40 miles away, and we were in a place called the Weser River, and we waited there until the war was over.
How did you feel when you heard that the war was over?
I felt good because I thought I'd like to go home, and it was interesting. The night the war was over, we were allowed to put lights on in the Jeeps. Up until that time, what they did is they taped the headlights of the Jeep so that there was only about this much light showing up, and so that they couldn't be seen very easily from up top. And we also had, every Jeep had a metal bar up front with a hook on it. Because what the Germans did, they would string wire across the road at this level for the average driver, and some of the guys got their heads cut off. So they put that on, which would snap the wires. The reason that they taped up the headlights at night is that every night the Germans would send over a small reconnaissance plane. We called the guy Betchek Charlie. That was his name. You could hear him droning overnight at night, that way. And to this day, when I hear a plane at night, not a jet, but a small plane going overhead, I think of that. It was interesting. It wasn't scary because I knew they couldn't see us. which combat, what theater would I have preferred? The theater that I went to.
Yeah.
I think that in the Pacific, from what I heard, because my cousin was in the Pacific, and he wrote that the living conditions there were horrible. Aside from the weather and the swamps, there were insects and snakes and all kinds of things that added to the misery of being caught in that kind of a swampy environment. So I was glad I didn't go there. Did I think one theater was more important than the other? No, I don't. I think the Pacific Theater was important. In a way, I think that the European theater was more important because it was my feeling, and maybe most everybody's feeling, that if we could knock Germany out of the war, that the Japanese wouldn't be that tough to handle. It might have been a misconception on my part, but that was what I thought. Because I think that the Germans, as far as fighting capabilities, they were pretty formidable. But I suppose they felt the same as we did. Now, the next question you asked me is, did I have to conjure up hatred of Germans or Japanese? I wouldn't say that I hated them. I despised them. That's different than hating them. I despised them for what they did and for what they were making me do. And I have to say that to this day, I have some really mixed feelings about both of them. I think, I'm not sure about the Germans, but there's something inherent in the Japanese culture that's mean and vicious, I think. And I'm not so sure that if they had it to do all over again, that there would be any different, because they raped half of the Asian continent. They destroyed things that were horrible to Americans. And a lot of Americans died from malnutrition and disease because of what those people did. So I don't have any bad feelings against individual Japanese, but as a group, I think they're still capable of doing things like that. Maybe I'm wrong, I hope I am. Did I see a concentration camp? Yes, I did. There was one concentration camp, I didn't see any men there, but they're all women. And they looked in pretty good shape. So, but they were working so that they had to keep them in good shape, otherwise they couldn't work. But it was still sad because most of them, from the conversations I could have with them, I didn't speak their language very well, was that they didn't know where their parents were, their families were, they didn't know where their brothers and sisters were. And I thought it was a pretty sad state of affairs. I did come across one place, it looked to me like a barn. It was a barn. And we came on, I have some pictures of this somewhere at home. Came on to smoking bodies. They were still smoking. And from what they told us was that the Germans, when they left the people, they locked them in the barn and set the barn on fire. The war was almost over at this time. So I never forgot that either.
What was your responsibility with the concentration camp? Were you liberating them or what?
No, they were already liberated. We got there after they were liberated. We weren't the first ones there. Mm-hmm. And
just helping out?
Well, we were there, and shortly after that the war ended, so we could sort of mingle with them and talk to them. If the war was going on, we wouldn't have had time for it.
Right.
We would not have had time for it because we didn't stay too much in one place. You're asking me, do I think that the war in the Pacific was a racist war? What does that mean? What do you mean?
I think the question means, do you think that the term, I think it's referring to the term Jap and like calling them slant eyes and stuff. Do you think that fueled a lot of anger? I don't know.
You mean calling them names like that? Do I think that we were fighting them because they were a different culture and a different color, you mean?
Essentially, yes.
No, I don't think so. I think if they hadn't have bombed Pearl Harbor, it wouldn't have happened.
Right.
As far as, was it a racist war as far as they were concerned? I don't know. I can only go by the way they treated people, and I have to say, it may not have been racist, but it's got this inherent meanness in them, I think. And I think that may be part of an Oriental culture. I don't know. I try not to think that way. And how do I feel about the concentration camps in the United States? I didn't think of them as concentration camps. These people could live and nobody bothered them. They weren't worked to death. And my idea of a concentration camp is a place where people were put to death, were starved to death, were beaten to death, and were tortured until they died. That is a concentration camp. What happened to the Japanese here, I think was wrong, but I don't think you could call it a concentration camp. I would call it I don't know what the hell to call it. I would call it a camp that shouldn't have existed, even though they did put I think some Germans and Italians in these camps too. And certainly that was wrong, because I saw a lot of Italians and German guys in the army, and I could see that they were just as anxious to do the job that I was and other people were. You asked me about combat experience. I saw the action across, I would say, Holland into Germany, and across Germany, and I could have brought the history of the division, but I thought maybe you wouldn't have time for it. But it shows where we started and where the war ended, and then the division coming back. Liberty ships, that's what they call them. They built thousands of them. My most dangerous experience in combat. I don't know, they were all dangerous. I mean, when you're in combat, it's dangerous. People are shooting at you, you're trying to duck out. I remember the day that we heard that President Roosevelt died. I was laying in a ditch and we were being bombed. I remember that only because, not because of the bombing, because it happened at the same time they told us that Roosevelt had died. So my feeling was that, it is, that it was just dangerous to be there. I saw some acts of heroism. I didn't see any cowardice. And while I'm at it, I want to mention something too about the American soldier, the way they carried on with the German civilians. I saw no German civilian mistreated. I saw no German civilian that we stole anything from. I saw no women being abused. I didn't see any unkind act on the part of an American soldier at all the time that I was in that place. Occasionally I would see, if we caught prisoners, somebody would smack one of them for some, I didn't do it, that wasn't my job, smack one of them and they were told to lay off. So I didn't see any mistreatment of Germans at all. The Germans, I thought, were involved in this horror show. It couldn't have happened if they didn't have their help. I thought that of course you couldn't find a Nazi in Germany as soon as the war was over for love of money. Nobody was a Nazi anymore. But they all probably all were sympathetic to it. About my superior officers, they were friends of ours. And they put their lives on the line too, and they were by our sides, by our side. They suffered the same as we did when it was cold, and that was a cold winter. We'd pull our blankets and maybe 5, 6, or 7 of us would sleep together. And the officers were mixed in with us. Otherwise, they they would have been very comfortable. It was warm sleeping in a bunch, like a bunch of dogs sleeping together, in a way. But they were trustworthy, very knowledgeable, and you have to remember that most of them were like myself. We were college people. And very few that, at least the ones that I chummed around with, were not. Not because I selected them, it's because that's what they mostly were. And in our division, they had what they call an officer's candidate school that they closed up. And we got thousands of them coming in our division. They were all college graduates. So, and the officers were very good. There was a couple of them that were stupid, we thought. Maybe they weren't, but we thought they were, but we didn't do anything about that. They were just stupid. Maybe they weren't, but we thought they were. Did I ever refuse to obey an order? No, I didn't. But I can tell you about one fellow that did. There was a highly decorated soldier, very highly decorated. This guy was a Jeep driver. His name was Pelosi. I remember him very well. He was a good friend of mine. About 2 days before the war was over, maybe 3 days, because we didn't know when it was going to be over. It turned out to be that much. You could tell the war was over because everything was getting lax. And we were waiting around, and as I told you, in the Ways of River. Now, there was a Lieutenant Swan that went up to take a look over something. I didn't go up there, and he was shot. So they tried to decide who was going to go up there and get him. As I said, it was in a medical attachment. Well, we had a feeling that the war was almost over. Nobody wanted to go up it because there must have been a sniper up there that got him. So we decided to draw straws because the sergeant, he was a tech sergeant, said, look, why did you draw straws to go up? So we drew straws, and Pelosi drew a short straw. He said, I'm not going. So the sergeant said, well, you gotta go. You drew the short straw and all this. It was back and forth and back and forth. Finally had him arrested. Just a decorated guy. And they took him away, and we heard that they were gonna be very severe with him for disobeying an order. So we all got together and wrote a letter, one letter which a couple of hundred guys signed and sent it off to Eisenhower. And I don't think he went to prison. I think he got probably thrown in the brig, and I don't know about his discharge. Maybe, I think there were 3 kinds of discharges: honorable discharge, dishonorable discharge, and some other kind of a discharge that was in between. I think he probably got one of those. But he was a good guy. He wasn't a coward. He just, I don't know what the hell got into him. We all told him to go, but he didn't go. Did I ever know any kill anybody? No, I did not. No, I did not. I had a gun, but I never shot it at anybody. I was a medic, and I had a gun just because I wasn't sure if people would care if I was a medic or not. I was determined that if somebody tried to kill me, I'd shoot him if I could. Did we have contact with SS troops? Yes. And the contact we had with them was when they were facing us at times. And I think that they were different. They used to wear something in German called Totenkopf, which means a death head, which was like a skull. Mm-hmm. I don't remember if it had crossbones on it or not, but they wore those. And I got a hold of one of those. I don't know what happened to it. I probably threw it away or something. By the way, that gun that I had was a very nice .32. Beautiful gun, very accurate. And I brought it home with me. And I kept it at home, and I never showed it to my mother. I'll tell you an interesting thing about that. I called my mother from Newport News when we landed on the way home. And she said to me, where are you? I said, I'm in Newport News. My mother was a redhead. And she said to me, look, she said, I'm going to send, my brother was a lawyer. She said, I'm going to send a suit to your brother's office. When you come in to Boston, I want you to go to his office and take that uniform off. I don't want to see you in it again. And I started to say something to her, and she cut me off short. So that's exactly what I did. I don't want to put the cart before the horse. But I had a dog, too, whose name was Moxie. You know what Moxie is?
No.
Anybody know him? There was a drink that was very popular before the war called Moxie. And it was a drink with quinine in it, so it was kind of bitter. It was actually bitter and fuzzy, and it was, when it was served cold, it was actually kind of refreshing, quite refreshing. So they used to say, did you ever hear the expression, he's got a lot of moxie?
Yeah.
You've heard it.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of moxie, he's got a lot of pep to him. So that was, anyway, I called the dog Moxie. He was a pretty good sized dog. So I wanted to take him home because I loved that dog. And I gave him a shot of morphine to put him in a barracks bag. I had no idea what I was going to do with him once I got him in a ship. And I got on the ship, and no sooner did I get on the ship, it was in the daytime, going home, I heard somebody holler out to me, "Hey, Roy!" And I looked up, and on the bridge, there was a guy up there, Lester Larkin. He was a merchant marine, and he was the first mate on the ship. And he came from Malden, where I came from. So he told me to come up, so I brought the barracks bag with me, and he said, "What do you got in that bag?" I told him what. He said, "You're a nut." He said, "But you leave the dog up here, and you have to eat with us." I ate with him. I didn't eat with the rest of them, which was very good. And I got the dog home, and I no sooner walked in the house with the dog. My mother had a cat, always. My mother said, "Get rid of that dog." She hadn't seen me in almost 3 years. She said, "Get rid of the dog." I said, "Ma," she said, "Get rid of the dog." So I called my brother, he took the dog. But anyway, that was my mother. We took a lot of prisoners. As a matter of fact, at one time, we had, I think it was about 100,000 Germans surrendered to our division. There's a picture of it in that book that I would have brought you. And it was quite a sight to see them lay down their guns and all that stuff. And I think that they just told them to get the hell out of there. We couldn't handle 100,000. The war was over anyway, just about. They told us to get lost. What we were going to do with them anyway. Took their guns. But they did have werewolves, you know, after the war. You ever hear of werewolves? You heard of werewolves? They called them it was like a German secret outfit that they wanted to kill American soldiers after the war, so sort of a resistance.
Yeah.
So we had to watch out for those when we went out at night. Only one time that I think that there was one there, we were coming home late at night from somewhere, we heard some noise in an alley. Okay, so we just emptied our pistols down that alley, whether we hit anybody or not, I don't know. We didn't go down to check it. Now, how did I like the people of Italy? I wasn't in Italy, but I was in France, Belgium, Netherlands, England, and Germany. Everybody treated us all right except the French. The French were the only ones that would steal from the American soldiers, hold them up, and cheat them. I can tell you that. That's all I want to say about that. The Belgians were fine. The Dutch were fine. As a matter of fact, we spent some time in a Dutch town, and next thing I knew, about a year after I got home, I got a wedding invitation to attend a wedding of one of the daughters of the people that I got to know there, so I thought that was kind of nice. Any misconceptions that the American public has about World War II? Was it like the Band of Brothers? Yes. The Band of Brothers was a very, very good depiction of what it was like to be in an infantry regiment. The misconception is, I think, that we shouldn't have thrown an atom bomb at the Japanese. Well, I know they were getting us ready to go to Japan. I certainly didn't think that you could beat the odds twice. I can't see any difference between killing 100,000 people in 5 minutes are killing 100,000 people in 3 days. Now, when they firebombed Tokyo, more people were killed there at that time than were killed when they threw the nuclear bomb. So I can't see a big difference there. The people say we shouldn't have done it. Well, let me tell you that it would have been bad for the Japanese if it didn't happen. And it would have been bad for the American soldier that would have to go and invade Japan. I can tell you, Japan would have been, if you've ever seen pictures of Germany, there wasn't even, you couldn't find one brick on top of another in that country. And I don't care whether you went out in the country or whether you went in the city, the place was level. And I think that there's no question that they would have leveled Japan even more so. So I think it ended the war. It was a quick thing, and I think that President Truman did the right thing. How would I sum up the efforts of the Allies in World War II? I think they were really allies that time. Not like now, fair weather friends. My own efforts, I did the best I could. I did what I was expected to do. I did it with pride, and I did it with fear, and I did it with some very good friends of mine. Do I carry any animosity towards our old adversary? I explained to you how I felt about that. I can't get it out of my head that these people were responsible for the damage that they brought on the world and on themselves. And I'm not sure about the Germans, but I do know that, and I don't think even the German soldier did what the Japanese soldier did. There's an inherent something, maybe from the samurai business or whatever it is, that those people have, and I hope they got rid of it, but I don't know.
I just have a couple questions I have from when you were speaking. Because you're a medic, you must have seen some pretty awful things. Did you become accustomed to those?
No.
No?
No.
It always bothered you?
No, it always bothered me. I knew the people that I was treating, even though I must say that I did treat some German soldiers that were badly hurt too. I couldn't just see them laying there bleeding and screaming. I just couldn't do that.
Right.
I took care of our own boys first, then I looked around to see if there were any Germans around, and there were, and I treated them too. Incidentally, I got a Bronze Star for that. I just couldn't leave them there, even though I felt in my heart that I should have, but I didn't.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Okay.